time travel, flying saucers, and so many stabbings. That can make for an exciting movie, but when it comes out of nowhere, it also ruins them. The science fiction Western adventure series Firefly quickly amassed a number of fans, but it was canceled by Fox after only one season. Firefly clearly had the potential to improve and expand, so series creator Joss Whedon stepped back behind the camera to direct the feature film Serenity, which serves as a continuation of the show. The film picks back up with Captain Malcolm Reynolds and his crewmates, who are responsible for protecting the powerful River Tam from the evil governmental body known as the Alliance. The Alliance dispatches a ruthless agent known only as the Operative to dispatch the crew of the Serenity and capture the young psychic. Serenity does a great job at raising the stakes and giving each of the characters room to grow. Unfortunately, fan-favorite character Wash, played by Alan Tudyk, meets his untimely end right before the final battle begins.
I'm a leaf on the wind. Watch out.
It would be one thing if the death had felt earned, but the shocking moment feels like it's only there to emotionally manipulate the audience. It was later revealed by Whedon that Wash was killed off because Tudyk could not commit to any potential sequels. The final scene of 10 Cloverfield Lane feels like a completely different movie compared to the events that preceded. That's because it pretty much was. 10 Cloverfield Lane was based off the script The Cellar, written by Josh Campbell and Matthew Stuckett. J.J. Abrams' production company Bad Robot decided to acquire the film's script and repurpose it as a spin-off to their 2008 found-footage sci-fi horror hit, Cloverfield. Abrams said, "There were so many elements that felt like the DNA of this story were of the same place that Cloverfield was born out of." The film follows a woman named Michelle, who gets into a car accident as she's driving through Louisiana. Michelle wakes up to learn that she's now the prisoner of an enigmatic man named Howard, and that he's trapped them in an underground bunker. He tells her that, following an attack of possibly extraterrestrial origin, he has decided to isolate from the rest of the world. Michelle and her fellow captive, Emmett, uncover Howard's deceitful ways during their time held prisoner. In the final scene, Michelle manages to escape Howard's bunker. Things seem to be going well until aliens attack, and she realizes that Howard was telling the truth.
Come on.
This ending removes all the gut-churning ambiguity of the film. It's never entirely clear if Howard is being fully honest until that point, and it probably should have stayed that way. Superman the movie is optimistic, brightly colored, and has a self-aware sense of humor. However, the stakes are still high thanks to Christopher Reeve's incredibly sincere performance. Reeve captures all the anguish that Kal-El is going through as he tries to live a normal life as Clark Kent. His relationship with Daily Planet reporter Lois Lane is also thoughtful and touching. Superman the movie is hardly realistic, but it does a great job of explaining the mythology of the iconic character and the extent of his abilities. However, the film's ending introduces a ridiculous new power that had never been previously mentioned in any comic book. In the movie's climax, Superman saves innocent civilians from the aftermath of the explosion in the San Andreas Fault, but he can't save Lois, who dies in the rubble. Superman cries out in heartbreak, but thinks back to the lessons that his adopted father had taught him. Superman then flies around the world so fast he reverses its rotation, allowing him to turn back time and save Lois. Audiences may have been able to believe a man could fly, but unexpected time travel is another thing entirely. Alex Proyas' disaster film, Knowing, is an enthralling mystery, right up until its confounding conclusion. The film poses the haunting possibility that various world disasters are connected in some way. MIT astrophysics professor John Kessler attends a ceremony at his son Caleb's elementary school, where a time capsule from 50 years ago is brought up from the ground. Within the buried capsule is a mysterious sheet listing different numerals. When John begins studying the sheet, he realizes that it contains dates, coordinates, and casualty numbers for different disasters. Throughout the film, Caleb hears mysterious voices speaking to him, which he eventually realizes belong to extraterrestrial creatures that predicted the disastrous events. The aliens reveal to John that they are saving the chosen children by transporting them through interstellar arcs. Unfortunately, though, the adult professor is not allowed to join them. While the extraterrestrial storyline works as the story's ending, it doesn't serve as a satisfying conclusion to what's actually at the heart of the film, John's relationship with his son. Both John and Caleb have been in mourning since the death of John's wife, Allison, and their search for answers has allowed them to bond. It doesn't seem right that John and Caleb aren't able to spend their futures together. On the other end of the father-son spectrum, Steven Spielberg's 2005 adaptation of H.G. Wells' novel War of the Worlds is not your typical summer blockbuster. It's a disturbing and realistic look at how the planet might respond to an interstellar invasion. War of the Worlds is one of Spielberg's darkest films, with sequences of massive cities being destroyed, feeling particularly unnerving in the aftermath of 9/11. War of the Worlds also contains one of Tom Cruise's most underrated performances. Cruise's character, Ray Ferrier, isn't a very present father, but he needs to reconnect with his children, Robbie and Rachel, if he wants to keep his family together.
Maybe a little blackjack?
I'm allergic to peanut butter.
Since when?
Birth.
During one of the more emotional scenes in the film, Ray is forced to let Robbie go when his son decides to join the US Marines in their battle against the aliens. Ray realizes that Robbie must be free to be his own man, that he can no longer dictate his son's life. He has to deal with not knowing whether his own son will live or die. However, Robbie somehow survives the assault and appears during the last few moments as Ray and Rachel finally reach safety. It's a hasty wrap-up that gives an unnecessary conclusion to Ray's relationship with Robbie, as the story would be much more powerful if Robbie's fate was unclear. The fact that Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull can be considered a science fiction movie at all is enough reason for fans to complain. The Indiana Jones franchise originated as a series of treasure hunting adventure films inspired by the classic film serials of the 1930s, incorporating mythology, history, and fantasy elements. The fourth installment, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, was released in 2008, 19 years after the character's last theatrical appearance.
I've got a bad feeling about this.
Although Kingdom of the Crystal Skull received mixed responses from critics and fans, the film has a lot more merit than many of its detractors would lead you to believe. Yes, the story is unrealistic and a bit goofy, but Indiana Jones has always been a little bit fantastical. Since the first three films were inspired by 1930s cinema, it made sense for Kingdom of the Crystal Skull to pay tribute to B-movies from the 1950s. However, this doesn't excuse the bizarre ending that introduces aliens in alternate dimensions. A flying saucer just feels completely out of place in an Indiana Jones movie, coupled with some truly embarrassing CGI effects and a melodramatic wedding between Indy and his old flame Marion Ravenwood. The whole thing is a major disappointment. It's impossible to deny the ambition of what the Wachowski sisters accomplished with the original Matrix trilogy. The first three films pack in so much mythology and character development that it can even feel overwhelming. The Wachowskis clearly succeeded in telling the story that they set out to create, but The Matrix Revolutions falls flat with how it handles its main characters' fates. During the final battle between mankind and the Sentinels, Trinity is killed after being impaled by pieces of rebar. This shocking moment feels like it's only there to gut punch the viewer, particularly after Neo made such an effort to save her in The Matrix Reloaded. Neo's death doesn't feel good either, but it's more understandable. He's always been portrayed as a Christ figure, so his self-sacrifice makes sense. However, the Wachowskis really go out of their way to make sure that the audience understands their biblical allusions, spelling out something that should already be obvious. Then again, this wasn't really the end for our heroes after all, as they made a triumphant return decades later in The Matrix Resurrections. Anything said about Zack Snyder's 2013 Superman story Man of Steel is bound to be controversial, but the film's ending is one of the most contentious parts of what's already a very divisive film. During the Battle of Metropolis, Superman manages to get the evil General Zod in a headlock. As he does, Zod threatens to kill an innocent family. Seeing no alternative, Superman snaps Zod's neck, crying out in torment over his own actions. Would Superman really kill a living being?
There's only one way this ends, Cal. Either you die, or I do.
Man of Steel actually does a great job at handling this moment, as Superman realizes that letting Zod live would only result in the death of more innocent people. However, what makes the ending so frustrating is that throughout the battle leading up to that moment, Superman makes no effort to save anyone else from collateral damage. Innocent civilians are buried alive as debris falls from the city's skyscrapers. It's nice that Superman cares about the family that Zod nearly kills, but it just doesn't seem like he cares about anyone else, except for Lois, of course. Released in 2018, Black Panther raised the Marvel Cinematic Universe to new heights. It's not just another superhero movie. Black Panther has something serious to say about systemic racism and discrimination. The young T'Challa is forced to consider the merits of Wakanda's isolation when his cousin Killmonger threatens to take the throne for himself. Killmonger actually raises some good points. Wakanda has done very little to help struggling people outside of its borders. But what begins as a compelling superhero movie with political overtones turns into just another generic comic book film at its conclusion. Killmonger and T'Challa's armies battle in a large open field in a sequence that's virtually identical to the much better ending of Avengers Infinity War. The CGI effects look cheap and tacky, which is surprising considering how consistent Marvel Studios' visual effects work had been up until this point. The cherry on top, of course, is the killing off of one of the most compelling villains the MCU has ever seen. The work of science fiction author Philip K. Dick has inspired some of the most influential sci-fi films ever made, including Blade Runner, Total Recall, and Minority Report. While all of these films have action and adventure, they're definitely more philosophical than your average summer blockbuster. The 2011 sci-fi thriller, The Adjustment Bureau, inspired by Dick's short story Adjustment Team, also had the potential to be another elevated genre story. While The Adjustment Bureau has a promising beginning, it also turns into a standard sci-fi action movie by the end. The film is set within a world where a latent group of influencers tries to prevent honest politician David Norris from falling in love with his constituent, Elise Sellis. The first two acts are very intriguing, as David and Elise slowly realize how their lives are being controlled by invisible puppeteers.
I'm sorry that I hurt you.
Oh my God.
Don't worry about him, he's with them.
Unfortunately, the last third of the film features the pair running through doorways to escape Bureau forces in a climax not too different from Monsters, Inc. It's a disappointingly safe conclusion to an otherwise excitingly non-traditional film. If anyone tells you that they completely understood Vanilla Sky after just one viewing, they're probably lying. Cameron Crowe's 2001 romantic mystery thriller is one of the most complex science fiction films ever made. Inspired by Alejandro Amenabar's 1997 Spanish film Open Your Eyes, Crowe's version drew mixed responses upon its initial theatrical release. Vanilla Sky unfolds in a non-linear way, following the journey of privileged publishing agent David after he's disfigured in an accident. During the final moments of the film, David must choose whether to accept his reality or take a literal leap of faith. Thematically, this works, but Crowe packs so many revelations into the final scene that it weakens the emotional impact of David's decision. A revised ending that was included on the 2015 Blu-ray improves the film by adding slightly different dialogue and additional scenes.